Hello, and welcome to a Pokemon XD Gala Darkness video, where today I'm going to be completing the game with the Persian and Delcatty lines. And these two cats I do think are going to do fairly well. However, whenever I've had the option of using them in the past, usually I stop using them around the mid to late game. So it'll be interesting to see how well they actually perform throughout that last section of the game. Now, despite how negative that may have sounded, I do have high hopes for these two, because the normal type is always really good, and also they have a lot going for them. So with that, let's go ahead and move on to their stats and move pool. Starting with Meowth, it has 40 HP, 45 attack, 35 defense, 40 special attack, 40 special defense, and 90 speed, making it very fast. However, its other stats are very well rounded, though not terrible, especially in the early game, but it doesn't evolve into Persian until level 28, so it might still feel a little bit weak until then. Moving on to its moves, and it gets access to normal and dark type moves through level up. However, through TMs and tutors, it gets access to quite a wide variety of moves. The standout ones being Thunderbolt, Shadow Ball, and Water Pulse, which all could come in handy. And now moving on to Skitty, who has 50 HP, 45 attack, 45 defense, 35 special attack, 35 special defense, and 50 speed, making it a very well-rounded Pokemon. And through level up, it gets access to a majority of normal type moves as well as Feint Attack. However, the thing is that because it's a stone evolution, whenever I decide to evolve it, all the moves further down the line will not be obtainable, though luckily its best moves come from the tutor and TMs, so it really shouldn't be that much of an issue. Now, what's great about this pairing is that even though there is a lot of overlap in the TMs, Skitty luckily gets Ice-type moves, which allows it to differentiate itself from Meowth. But anyway, I think it's about time we move on to our Skitty in particular, which has a hasty nature, raising its speed but lowering its defense, which I think is perfectly fine because the extra speed might be necessary later on down the line. It gets access to the Cute Charm ability, which causes contact moves from the opponent to sometimes cause Infatuation, which should definitely come in handy, and it gets Growl, Tackle, Tail Whip, and Attract by level 10. So with that, let's go ahead and move on to Meowth, who has a naughty nature, raising its attack but lowering its special defense. And honestly, that's fine as well. Meowth is already really fast, and the more damage the better, I think. It gets the pickup ability, which will sometimes allow it to pick up items off the ground, something as simple as an antidote, or sometimes a King's Rock. And by level 10, it gets Scratch and Growl. So with that, we go into the game, and at level 11, Meowth gets Bite, and then I go into the battle against the Old Man, and as you might expect, the early game is pretty easy for these two. None of the Pokemon are exceptionally difficult, and having Stab on all of my normal type moves means battles go a lot faster. So we get to the Old Man in no time flat, and he's not all that much of a threat either. Unfortunately, Skitty got paralyzed off of a Thunder Punch, though that only prolongs the inevitable. Now, I'd just like to take a second and call out Skitty's idle animation, which makes it seem so energetic because it's just constantly shaking back and forth. Now, I know that the video that you're seeing now is at 4 times the speed, but once it learns the move Sing, it'll be at 2 times, and you can see it's still just going back and forth really fast. It's very funny. Anyway, with that, we go ahead and move on to the Power Rangers, and today we're going to fight Green, for no other reason than his Pokemon are just a bit lower leveled, and I'm hoping that both Meowth and Skitty attacking will be able to take an individual Pokemon down in a single turn. Anyway, with that, let's go ahead and move on to just a bit of rambling. If you are enjoying this video so far, consider liking, and if you have any Pokemon suggestions, please put them down below. For quite a while now, I've been whittling down the backlog of Valentine's themed videos that I accumulated all throughout February that unfortunately didn't go out. And now we are at our second to last one with Skitty and Meowth. Now the worst part is this video was originally planned to come out right before Valentine's Day, and unfortunately it just never happened because other videos got priority and this one kind of got pushed back further and further. So I'm glad these cats finally get their chance to shine. Now moving on to something completely different, summer is right around the corner, and I want to get a lot of these videos recorded so that I can release them throughout the summer in case it's a really busy summer this year, which brings us to this part of the video where I usually just talk about what's on my mind or animations or something like that. And since I'm going to try to record them in batches, I'm probably going to run out of topics, and so the Power Rangers might be shortened or skipped altogether, just depending on if I have anything to talk about. Now, I do really like this section of the video because it gives me a chance to connect, but I'm just going to run out of topics pretty quick. Anyway, now inside the Cypher base, I run into another Skitty. Hello, other Skitty. And I'd just like to point out Skitty's Feint animation is incredible because it really sells how painful being taken down is. But anyway, goodbye, other Skitty. I got the Water Pulse TM from doing Mount Battle Area 2, and I teach that to Skitty over Double Slap, and then at level 20, Meowth gets Payday. Moving on, I catch the Carvana for the Black Glasses item, raising all dark type damage by 10%, which will help Bite do a little more. And then I go into the battle against Lavrina, so these with a Love Disc and a Beautifly, and I go for Payday because that is my best damaging move. And on top of that, I also get a little bit of extra money every time I use it, which is pretty nice. Anyway, I'm able to take Beautifly down to half with Water Pulse, but on this turn I decide to actually call Skitty, and that's because I think the best way to actually win this battle is by using the move Sing. Now it is only 50% accurate, and even with +1 accuracy, it only brings it up to about 67%. So it is still unlikely to hit, though it is really my best option for getting through this fight. So I go for it, and I'm able to put the Love Disc to sleep, and I'm able to put the Roselia to sleep. I go for Payday, taking it down to yellow, and then Tackle should hopefully finish it off, which it does, and then she sends out her final Pokemon, which is a Shadow Delcatty, which is very fitting. And there's a reason I haven't evolved my Skitty yet, and that's because I wanted to defeat this Delcatty before I did it. That way Skitty would have some sort of achievement before evolving. Of course I am getting a bit ahead of myself, because even though I was able to put Delcatty to sleep, there is a good chance that it'll wake up before I'm able to take it down. And the fact that I landed another sleep is very lucky. In fact, the amount of luck in this fight is honestly incredible. I go for Payday, which takes Delcatty down to red. Love Disc unfortunately wakes up again, takes Meowth down to 1, and so I'm able to finish off the Delcatty, but Love Disc, if it decides to attack the wrong Pokemon, I'm definitely done for. Skitty gets taken down to 3, Sing misses, go for another bite. Love Disc luckily flinches this time, goes to sleep, and I'm able to finish it off with Tackle and Payday. Now in hindsight, I probably could have just gone for Tackle and Payday and taken it down sooner, but I didn't know how much damage I was going to deal, so we beat Lavrina and we move on to evolving Skitty into Delcatty. Now like I said before, it is a Moonstone evolution, so I do lose access to all the moves after this, but evolution is definitely worth it because Delcatty has 70 HP, 65 attack, 65 defense, 55 special attack, 55 special defense, and 70 speed. So all of its stats are raised by 20 points, which isn't an incredible improvement, though it is going to be helpful nonetheless. So anyway, let's go ahead and move on, and of course you can't have a Pokemon XD Galen Arctis video without the obligatory Mirror B. How are you doing on this fine day, Mirror B? Well, it's always good to see you, but we actually need you today because I'm going to pick up your Voltorb for the Magnet item, raising all electric type moves by 10%. And running over to the Railgun Tower, I pick up my two favorite TMs, Hidden Power and Protect, and at the same time I'm going to pick up the move Thunder, which is going to be very helpful for this next fight. So with that, I go ahead and teach Hidden Power to both of my Pokemon, and Delcatty has Hidden Power Ghost, which is a decent Hidden Power type. It allows it to hit Ghosts for super effective damage, which is something. And Meowth has Hidden Power Psychic at 50 base power, so it's not incredibly powerful, and Meowth isn't much of a special attacker, so that one might get replaced pretty soon. Though I decide to go ahead and teach Delcatty Thunder over Meowth, because it's a higher level, is already evolved, and Meowth is going to get a better move in just a bit. Soon after, I run into another Meowth. Hello, other Meowth, and this one's actually a Shadow Meowth. Of course, I already have my Meowth, so goodbye other Meowth. I catch the Swinub for the Never Melt Ice item to raise Ice type damage by 10%, and then at level 28, Meowth evolves into Persian, which is going to be very helpful because not only do its stats raise, it also gets the Limber ability preventing paralysis. But anyway, it gets 65 HP, 70 attack, 60 defense, 65 special attack, 65 special defense, and 115 speed, which is a 25 point stat increase across the board. Now I do find this very interesting that they decided to make the two cats evolutions very similar in the amount of points that they give, though of course Persian starts out with a higher base stat total, and it also gets 5 more stats across the board. Moving on, I run into Snaddle, and he leads with a Lantern and a Quagsire, and I go for Payday, which doesn't do much to Lantern, and then I go for Hidden Power Ghost, which takes it down to half. So I should be able to finish it off on the following turn. Quagsire hits a Rock Tomb into Delcatty, which might make it slower than the Lantern, though I'm not sure yet. It luckily isn't, so I'm able to take it down, and then he sends out his next Pokemon, a Shadow Lunatone. Now, Lunatone is always a bit of a threat because it sets up Shadow Sky on the first turn, and if I'm not able to take it down by the second, it will go for Shadow Wave, dealing a lot of damage because of the 50% damage increase from the Fruity Pebbles. But anyway, unfortunately, the first turn I'm not able to take it down, though I do think it's in range for Bite to finish it off. And luckily it is, and then he sends out Cast Form, which is uniquely benefited by the Shadow Sky because it turns its Weather Ball into a 100 base power typeless move, simply because Shadow Sky is a weather effect. But anyway, I go for Thunder into it, which luckily does hit and takes Cast Form down to low yellow. Quagsire misses a Rock Tomb, and then I'm able to finish off the Cast Form on the following turn with a Bite. And once it goes down, he sends out his final Pokemon, which is Metang. And as long as Thunder hits, I think I'm in good shape. It takes it down to almost half, and I get a Lucky Paralysis, so now I'll be able to outspeed it no matter how many Rock Tombs get thrown my way. I go for Bite and another Thunder. Bite takes it down to low yellow, and Thunder connects again, finishing it off. All that's left is the Quagsire, which finishes off Delcatty. But as long as I get a lucky flinch, I think I should be able to win this. I get a lucky crit. Unfortunately, no flinch and slam hits. Okay, well that's a bit unfortunate, but I decide to go over to the move tutor to go pick up Body Slam, which is something I forgot to do before the first attempt. And I go back in again. This time, with the power of Body Slam, I'm doing over half to Lantern right away, and it gives Delcatty a chance to call to raise the accuracy of Thunder, though unfortunately it still isn't 100% accurate. I finish off the Lantern on the following turn, and then he sends out the Lunatone once again. At this time I decide to go for Attract into Quagsire, that way it's not doing as much damage, and hopefully it's not hitting so many Rock Tombs. I go for Bite and get a crit, taking Lunatone down to low red, and Water Pulse finishes it off, but not before it's able to set up Shadow Sky once again. Out comes Cast Form, and I might be able to take it down with a single Body Slam. I go for it, and Body Slam is doing well over half into the low yellow. Unfortunately, not quite a one-shot. Water Pulse does finish it off though, and then he sends out Metang once again. And now it's finally time to use Thunder to get the most amount of damage I can on it. And hopefully Metang shouldn't be too much of an issue. I go for Bite, which does a little bit of damage. It hits a Metal Claw, though luckily no attack boost, and Thunder takes it down to low red. So I know for a fact Metang isn't a threat anymore because I outspeed and finish it off with Bite on the following turn, so that just leaves the Quagsire left. I go for Water Pulse into it because luckily it doesn't have Water Absorb, so I get neutral damage on it. And that neutral damage isn't all that much. Another round of Fruity Pebbles, and then finally I go for Body Slam, which takes it down. So with that, we beat Snaddle on the second attempt, and then I teach Ice Beam to Delcatty, and with nothing really in between, we move on to Gonzap, who leads with a Nuzleaf and our Electrode. And on the first turn, the Nuzleaf is always going to go for Fake Out. I go for Body Slam, which takes down Electrode in a single hit, and luckily I didn't get paralyzed. Then out comes Vileplume, I go for Body Slam to finish off the Nuzleaf, then out comes Whiscash, and Ice Beam does a decent amount of damage to the Vileplume. Unfortunately, it does put Delcatty to sleep. I go for Body Slam to finish off the Vileplume, and then I call to wake up Delcatty. And then he sends out his final Pokemon, which is Skarmory. Now, Rock Tomb hits, lowering Persian speed, though luckily none of his Pokemon are all that fast. I go for Thunder, taking Skarmory down in a single hit, and then all that's left is the Whiscash, which takes half from Body Slam. It's a Hyper Beam, but that really doesn't matter. Ice Beam takes it down to just a sliver, and Body Slam finishes it off. And with nothing in between, once again, we move straight over to Gorgon, who leads with a Celio and a Lairon. And I call Delcatty on the first turn to raise the accuracy of Thunder, go for Body Slam into Celio, which does get a paralysis, though unfortunately it doesn't actually get paralyzed, so it's able to use Earthquake and deal not much damage whatsoever, actually. I go for Bite to finish it off, and then he sends out Slowking, which I think might actually survive a Thunder, unless I get a critical hit and it goes down. Then he sends out Ursaring, Lairon hits an Iron Tail, dealing about half to Persian, and with a defense drop, Lairon is looking very worrying, so I decide to take it down, except Water Pulse doesn't actually do it, and it's able to hit another Iron Tail. Luckily it hit Delcatty this time, so it's able to survive. Now the thing is that even though I want to take down Lairon, to actually win this battle, I definitely need to take down Ursaring and then start dealing damage to his next Pokemon, the Shadow Primate, because unless I take it down, it's going to be a huge threat with Shadow Storm, and will probably take down Delcatty. And if I were to bring both of his Shadow Pokemon out, his second one being Shadow Hypno, it would also go for Shadow Storm, and definitely take down the rest of my Pokemon. So unfortunately, I did have to risk it a bit with Lairon either missing or getting confused, but I'm able to get past Gorgon on the first attempt, and then we go on to the final area of the game, where these two are doing really well. So as long as they're able to keep going at this pace, they should end up with a really good time. So with that, we move on to the battle against Lavrina. She leads with a Gardevoir and a Gorbis, and right away I go for Body Slam into Gardevoir to take it down in a single turn, and then out comes Roselia. I go for Thunder into Gorbis to take it down, and I got a crit as well, which is maybe necessary, I'm not sure. Then out comes Shadow Farfetch'd. I go for Body Slam into Roselia to take it down because I really don't want it to set up Leech Seed or use Attract. And then she sends out her final Pokemon, a Shadow Altaria. Unfortunately, Ice Beam doesn't quite take down the Farfetch'd, though Delcatty does avoid the Shadow Panic, so it's able to target the Altaria and take it down with an Ice Beam, which got a crit. I'm not sure if that was necessary, but we beat Lavrina on the first attempt. Now moving on to the battle against Snattle, and he leads with Metang and Quagsire. I go for Body Slam right away into the Quagsire, taking it down to low yellow, and Ice Beam finishes it off. And then he sends out Scizor, and unfortunately I don't really have a great way to deal with it. None of my moves are all that great, so I go for Body Slam, and luckily it gets a crit, taking it down to low yellow, and Water Pulse is able to finish it off with yet another crit. Then he sends out his first Shadow Pokemon, Shadow Solrock, which really shouldn't be too much of an issue. I'm able to take it down to low yellow with Fight, and Water Pulse takes it down, and so he sends out Castform, and Castform really isn't a threat, though Body Slam might not be able to take it down in a single hit, so I'm going to go ahead and use Ice Beam, though in hindsight maybe I should have gone for Thunder because it does go down. Then he sends out his final Pokemon, Shadow Starmie, and I do not very effective damage with Ice Beam. With that being said, I don't think Starmie is going to be all that much of a threat because Persian should be able to outspeed and take it down with a single Body Slam, and then all that's left is the Metang, which Water Pulse really isn't doing that much damage to, but honestly it's not doing much damage back either. So I go for Bite, taking it down to low yellow, and Water Pulse finishes it off. So with Snattle defeated, we now move on to Ardos, who leads with a Shadow Swallow and Alakazam, and actually this battle might be pretty easy. I am able to outspeed the Shadow Swallow, so I'm able to take down Alakazam right away. And then he sends out Kingdra. Swallow goes for Shadow Sky. I go for Thunder into Kingdra, doing quite a bit of damage, and the Fruity Pebbles go and chip it down just a little more. Now, unfortunately, even though I'd like to take down Kingdra this turn, I do need to get rid of the Swallow, which a crit Body Slam does do, though I'm not sure if that crit was necessary. Go for Ice Beam into Kingdra, taking it down to low red. And Hydro Pump, really not doing that much to Delcatty. Then out comes Heracross, which could potentially be an issue, but it usually just likes to go for Rock Tomb on the first turn, so I'm not sure if it's actually going to be able to use any of its fighting type moves. I take down the Kingdra, which brings out Electabuzz, his second Shadow Pokemon, and something I really hadn't considered is that Persian just got hit by the Rock Tomb, so it might actually be slower than Electabuzz. I'm hoping not. I go for Body Slam. It unfortunately does outspeed, taking down Delcatty, but Body Slam takes it down in return. And then he sends out his final Pokemon, a Shadow Snorlax, which I get to see before I go down to the Fruity Pebbles. So I decided to go ahead and teach Protect to Persian, that way it'll be able to heal up and survive a bit longer, and then I go into the battle once again. Now I already know that the starting of this team isn't all that dangerous, so I'm able to take down Alakazam right away. And I'm surprised by Persian learning Fake Out at level 59, which I decided to teach over Hidden Power right on the fly. And then he sends out Kingdra. Swallow actually decides to go for Shadow Half this time, which isn't great. Go for Ice Beam to take it down though, and then out comes the Heracross once again. And I decide to go for Body Slam to finish off the Kingdra and start dealing damage to the Heracross with Ice Beam because I know for a fact I can take down Electabuzz in a single Body Slam, though it does rely on Heracross not hitting Rock Tomb, though in this attempt it actually just decides to go for Brick Break and take me down immediately, which isn't great. Now that Shadow Snorlax and Electabuzz are out together, hopefully Electabuzz is just going to go for Shadow Mist to lower my evasiveness, but unfortunately it's going for Shadow Storm. So unfortunately I do need to take it down this turn, but luckily Snorlax does miss a Shadow Wind, which is only 60% accurate, so it's not all that unlikely. I go for Protect, and then Body Slam is dealing half to it, so unfortunately I won't be able to take it down this following turn. So I will need to get a bit lucky here. Luckily it is paralyzed now, and it misses another one. So with a little bit of luck, we're able to get past Ardos, and now we move on to Gorgon, who leads with a Slowking and an Ursaring. And right away, I go for Body Slam into the Slowking, dealing quite a bit of damage to it. And by calling the Delcatty, I'm able to get Thunder's accuracy up. Go for a Bite to finish off the Slowking, and then he'll send out Aggron, which is weak to Water Pulse, so hopefully it should go down in a single turn. It does not, but it does deal quite a bit of damage. Persian gets taken down to 4 HP, though luckily the leftovers does bring it up a little. Body Slam doesn't quite take down the Ursaring. Aggron goes down to another Water Pulse, and then he sends out Walrein. And Ursaring hits a Brick Break, dealing quite a bit to Delcatty. Now I decide to go for Body Slam and Thunder into Wall Rain, which does take me a second, but then I remember Ursaring's just going to predict that turn, so it's really not all that hard of a decision to make. Wall Rain goes down, and then he sends out his first Shadow Pokemon, a Shadow Poliwrath. Now Poliwrath really isn't all that dangerous on the first turn, though once it's set up and his next Pokemon comes out, the Shadow Mr. Mime, it could be a real threat, so I decide to take it down first, and Body Slam luckily gets a crit, taking it down in a single hit. And Ursaring unfortunately gets through the paralysis and is able to take down Delcatty, take down the Mr. Mime, and once again Ursaring hits through. So now moving on to the second attempt, and the start is exactly the same. I'm going to go for Body Slam, which gets a crit this time, taking Slowking down right away. But I'm just going to call to raise the accuracy of Thunder, go for Body Slam, which still doesn't quite take down Ursaring, and Water Pulse, which does quite a bit to Aggron. And then I decide to do something a little risky, and that's taking down both of his Pokemon right away. I really don't want to get hit by Brick Break, but also Iron Tail from Aggron does quite a bit of damage as well. I go for Body Slam, dealing half to Poliwrath, and a Thunder finishes it off, and then he sends out his final Pokemon, the Shadow Mr. Mime once again. Wall Rain goes for Ice Beam, really not dealing that much damage. Go for Body Slam, which I know takes down Mr. Mime, and then all that's left is the Wall Rain, which Thunder takes down to low yellow, and all that's left is to outspeed with Body Slam and finish it off. So now moving on to Eldis, he leads with a Shadow Manectric and Ninjask, and I'm going to go for Body Slam into Manectric, which unfortunately isn't a one-shot, and it was a bit risky to do because it does have the static ability, but luckily I don't get paralyzed, go for Ice Beam to finish it off, and then he sends out his next Pokemon, a Shadow Salamence. Now unfortunately, I was hoping that Manectric would go down in a single hit, so Ice Beam would deal 4 times effective damage against it, but unfortunately it didn't, so I go for Body Slam to take down the Ninjask because its Silver Winds are kind of annoying. Out comes Flygon. Salamence luckily just decides to go for Shadow Hold this turn, and Ice Beam gets a crit, taking it down. I'm not sure if that was necessary, but I'm definitely thankful for it. He then sends out Shadow Marowak, and I'm pretty certain I should be able to take down Flygon in a single Ice Beam, so I decide to go for Bite into Marowak, hoping that it flinches or misses. Flygon does go down in a single Ice Beam, and then he sends out his final Pokemon, a Shadow Lapras. Marowak does luckily flinch, so I'll be able to take it down this turn with an Ice Beam, and I can have Persian start dealing damage to Lapras. But Marowak actually survives the Ice Beam with quite a bit of health remaining. Luckily it does miss the Shadow End, otherwise Delcatty would have gone down. But given how close that was, I decided to have Persian finish off Marowak, and then I can go for Thunder to start dealing damage to the Lapras. Unfortunately it misses, and so Shadow Storm is able to take down Delcatty and deal a lot to Persian, though luckily Shadow Sky has just ended. I go for Body Slam, paralyzing it and getting the paralysis on top of it, another Body Slam, and another paralysis, which is very lucky, but we definitely take those, and we beat Eldis on the first attempt. Now before the final battle, I decide to teach Rain Dance to Delcatty, that way it can make better use of Thunder, and I teach it over Attract. And then I go into the battle against Shadow Wugia, and in hindsight I really should have gone for Fake Out on the first turn, but instead I went for Body Slam, which does deal a decent amount of damage. Shadow Blast does a lot to Delcatty though. Ice Beam takes it down to half. Another Body Slam and Ice Beam should finish it off, but Delcatty was taken down to half, and it survives at 2 HP, finishing it off with another Ice Beam. A very close fight, but then we move into the final battle against Greevil. He leads with a Shadow Rhydon and Moltres, and right away I go for Fake Out into the Moltres, and then I set up Rain Dance so I can use Thunder, but unfortunately Rhydon takes down Delcatty right away. And I guess I'll just see how much damage I do to Rhydon with Bite. It's about a quarter. So I will be able to finish off the next turn, but more importantly, Moltres is doing half my health and damage with a Shadow Fire, so I do need to take it down as soon as possible on the second attempt. He sends out Executor, which I guess at this point I may as well see how much Bite does to it. It does a little over half, and Persian goes down. So now moving on to the second attempt, and I go for Fake Out and Water Pulse this time to take down Rhydon right away. That way it's not a threat with Lightning Rod, and then out comes Executor. Moltres, of course, flinches from the Fake Out. I go for Bite into it, getting a crit, taking it down right away. That's very lucky. Then out comes Tauros, lowering our attack, which isn't great. I set up a Rain Dance. Moltres goes for Shadow Fire, taking Delcatty down to half, and unfortunately Delcatty gets burnt. I go for Body Slam into Moltres, not dealing all that much damage because of the Intimidate, and hopefully Water Pulse will be enough to finish it off, but it doesn't quite take it down. It does get confused, but doesn't hit itself in confusion, taking Persian down to 30 HP. And at this point, Tauros is going to go on the offensive because of how low our healths are. Go for Body Slam to finish off the Moltres, bringing out his Articuno. But Shadow Rush takes down Delcatty, and then all that's left is the Persian with an attack drop. I go for one last body slam into Tauros, dealing almost half. It gets paralyzed, but it's no use. So with that, I go ahead and teach Thunderbolt to Persian, which I decide to teach over Fake Out, and then I go into the battle once again, where almost right away I get burnt, which was another end to a run, and then it happened again. And the worst part is this was the last 3 battles, but luckily after a few more attempts, on attempt number 8, I go into the battle and I get a body slam paralysis on Moltres, and I deal quite a bit to it. And then I'm able to take down the Rhydon just as before. I go for another body slam to finish it off, and then he sends out Tauros and Executor. And I actually used a Balmer Candies to bring my levels up quite a bit more. Go for Ice Beam into Tauros, doing quite a bit to it. And then body slam to finish it off. I'm able to set up Rain Dance, and now with Tauros out of the picture, it won't be able to set up Shadow Sky anymore. Executor misses the Shadow End. The Articuno comes out, I go for body slam into it, dealing half, and then Thunder finishes it off, and then he sends out his final Pokemon, a Shadow Zapdos. Executor goes for Shadow End and is actually able to hit, taking Delcatty down to half HP. And then I go for body slam into the Zapdos, which in hindsight, it probably should have been Thunderbolt. Though I do get a paralysis, Zapdos goes down to an Ice Beam, Executor misses the Shadow End, and I go for Bite and Ice Beam to finish it off. So with that, we beat Greavil on the 8th attempt, but now it's time to see just how well these two did. They beat the game in a time of 10 hours, 20 minutes, and 6 seconds, with Delcatty at level 63 and Persian at level 67, with 13 feints throughout the game, 11 of those to bosses, and 2 of those to random trainers. So let's go and go over the pros and cons of these Pokemon, and I guess I'll start with the pros. Their movesets, especially on the Tutor and TM side, have a lot of diversity in types, and so they're able to do quite a bit with their moves. It is nice that Delcatty has Ice-type moves given to it because it gives it some way to stand out from Persian, who only really has Electric. And then moving on to their stats, of course Delcatty is just kind of a well-rounded Pokemon with nothing especially stand out, though it is still nice to have that kind of Pokemon because it means that it does well everywhere. But with that being said, it is just worse Persian in most of its stats. And on top of that, Persian also has an extreme speed stat, so it's able to get the jump on a lot of threats that Delcatty can't. On the other hand, though, it is nice to have a slower Pokemon in some occasions, which is why I taught it Rain Dance in the first place, because I knew Tauros was going to act first with Shadow Sky, and then immediately after Delcatty could shut it down with Rain Dance. So there's definitely some value in being a bit slower. Moving on, there's also the fact that they do very well against most of the random trainers throughout the game. Only having 2 losses to random trainers really goes to show just how strong these two are in combination with one another. Now to move on to some of the negatives, the first being that Meowth doesn't evolve until level 28, which is a fair ways into the game, so it does start to feel a little underpowered. When it evolves into Persian, it does help a bit, but especially towards the end of the game, it's a lot of hitting the opponent and then having Delcatty finish it off. And they also run into the problem of not having very good special attacking stats, and even though I did run Delcatty as a special attacker, it's really not meant to be. It gets Ice Beam, which is really nice, and at the time of Snaddle, I really wanted Electric-type moves to help deal with some of his Pokemon, and very early on I got the move Water Pulse, which I decided to teach to it, so it kinda just stuck with that set for the rest of the game because there's not a lot of great other options for it. And Persian is more or less in the same boat, but I decided to run it more physical. Anyway, with that being said, they do find themselves in the A- tier, doing very well for themselves. So if you did enjoy this video, consider liking and subscribing, and if you have any Pokemon suggestions, please put them down below. Thank you so much for watching, and bye.